You sit here tonight not by accident, but by an ancient pull from the unseen world. Something beneath thought, beneath memory, beneath history itself. There are moments in a life when the psyche begins to tremble with a quiet knowing, as if the soul has leaned close and whispered a secret through the veil. If you are listening to these words, it is likely because such a tremor has already begun within you. You feel it though perhaps you cannot name it. A subtle rearrangement of your inner architecture, a shift in your emotional gravity. Like the earth beneath your feet is preparing to become something new. The empath, once sensitive, once porous, once burdened by the tides of others, now stands at a threshold. And the threshold belongs to an evolutionary era. Many believe evolution is of the body, but the deepest evolution is of psyche. Jung knew that human nature does not change merely through intellect, but through the great turning of the unconscious, through symbols that rise like dawn from forgotten oceans of the soul. When an empath evolves, they do not simply become stronger. They become deeper. They begin to sense the collective unconscious more vividly, as if reality itself is speaking through the bloodstream. This transformation is not loud. It begins as a flicker, a dream, a strange inner resonance. And from that resonance emerges the first sign, the splitting of identity between who you once were and who you are now becoming. You may notice it in the quiet hours, when your reflection in the mirror feels both ancient and newly born. The empath undergoing evolution begins to detach from inherited scripts. The desire to please, the reflex to soften conflict, the habit of absorbing wounds like a sponge. Something within you asks, what if I am no longer here merely to feel? What if I am here to awaken? This questioning is not rebellion. It is emergence. In the old era, the empath survived by dissolving themselves into the needs of others. In the new era, the empath differentiates, not out of coldness but out of clarity. There comes a subtle shift. You begin to see yourself not as a passive receiver of emotional currents, but as a locus of consciousness, shaped by divine architecture. You awaken to boundaries, not as walls but as membranes, alive, intelligent, discerning. You sense that every emotion entering your field must be examined. Is this mine, or is it the shadow of another seeking shelter within me? And with this discernment comes the second revelation, the return of your emotional sovereignty. It is a peculiar moment when an empath realizes that compassion without self-awareness becomes self-erasure. In earlier years, you may have believed love meant taking pain into your body like a sacrament. You may have mistaken empathy for martyrdom. But evolution teaches you otherwise. You begin to feel a new pulse, like the heartbeat of an inner king or inner queen rising from the unconscious throne. You sense a presence in yourself that says, I can feel you, but I do not need to collapse into you. This is not a loss of sensitivity. It is refinement. The empath who evolves does not close their heart. The heart deepens until it becomes a vessel of discernment, capable of holding truth without bleeding. This awakening often arrives with dreams. Jung always considered dreams the royal road to the unconscious. And for the evolving empath, the dream world becomes stormed with symbolism. Perhaps you dream of water, once calm, now rising like tides beneath a full moon. Perhaps animals appear, the wolf no longer threatening but guiding, the serpent no longer feared but coiled in wisdom, the bird watching from above as if carrying a message you have not yet translated. These are not random fragments. They are heralds of the third sign, the call of archetype. The empath entering a new evolutionary era is visited by archetypes that once slept beneath the threshold of consciousness. They rise now because you are ready. You might feel a strange duality, vulnerability braided with power. You cry more deeply, yet you stand more firmly. Your intuition sharpens like a blade, but the blade does not cut. It reveals. You sense the lies beneath spoken words, the hunger beneath kindness, the wounds beneath cruelty. You see the child inside the aggressor, the shadow behind the saint. And while once this perception might have overwhelmed you, now it expands you. The empath evolving into a new being does not drown in awareness. They breathe it like oxygen. You are no longer merely absorbing emotion. You are translating soul. This marks the fourth unfolding. Empathy turning into inner vision. The world needs such vision now. Humanity stands on the edge of fragmentation, overwhelmed by noise, identity, fear, projection. Empaths were born for eras of intensity, but they are not meant to remain fragile. They are meant to become mirrors of the collective shadow, translators of unspoken grief, vessels through which the unconscious can surface and be seen without violence. Yet to serve as such a vessel, one must first understand the shadow within oneself. Evolution demands integration. And here the fifth movement reveals itself, the confrontation with your own darkness. For years you may have feared anger, desire, jealousy, ambition, believing these impulses to be proof of impurity. But the evolving empath learns the truth. Nothing within you is unholy. Darkness is not the absence of light. It is the womb of light. Within your shadow lives every instinct that once protected your soul when you did not yet know how to defend it. When anger rises now, do not exile it. Listen. When jealousy flickers, do not shame it. Study it. These emotions are teachers. They emerge not to harm you, but to liberate you from the naive fantasy that goodness requires self-denial. True empathy is not purity. It is wholeness. The sixth sign appears when you no longer fear silence. In the old era, stillness felt like abandonment, an empty field where unspoken pain grew like weeds. Now silence becomes sanctuary. You remember how to sit with yourself without distraction, without reaching outward for validation or belonging. You descend inward into the cave of psyche where the ancestors of feeling reside. You sit beside every version of yourself. The child who felt too much, the adolescent who hid their sensitivity to survive, the adult who carried love like a wound. And you realize, none of them were mistakes. They were prototypes. They were preparing you for this era. And then comes the seventh sign, the most mysterious, the most unmistakable. You begin to feel reality not as an external structure, but as an extension of your inner world. Synchronicities multiply like constellations across your days. You think of someone and they appear. You dream of change and a door opens. You feel a shift and the world bends accordingly. This is not magic in the superficial sense. It is alignment. When an empath enters a new evolutionary era, the psyche begins to speak in symbols, the universe responds as if it were listening, and the border between inner and outer world grows thin like morning mist. You are not simply in reality. You are participating in its creation. Some will call this madness. They are still dreaming. You are waking. Do not rush this transformation. Evolution is not a firework. It is a slow ignition deep beneath the sternum. It moves like seasons, like breath, like the moon pulling tides across the ocean floor. There will be moments of confusion. You may grieve the softness you once carried like a second skin. You may question whether this empowerment is betrayal. But remember, the empath does not evolve away from feeling. They evolve toward consciousness. Feeling remains, but now it is guided by awareness instead of compulsion. Love remains, but now it is chosen, not extracted. Compassion remains, but now it is rooted in truth rather than sacrifice. The path ahead is luminous and shadowed, like every true mythical journey. The psyche invites you forward not through certainty but through curiosity. You are not who you were and not yet who you will become. You stand in the cranial darkness, filled with quiet architecture, and it is here, suspended between worlds, that your wings are forming. Tonight we trace this metamorphosis further. We go deeper into the unconscious rivers where future empaths are being sculpted by invisible hands. Let us continue. You may notice, as we step deeper into this inner chamber, that evolution does not strip you of your softness. It refines it into something crystalline and unbreakable. The empath of the new era is not merely a healer. They are a bridge. A bridge between unconscious and conscious, between personal grief and collective myth, between the old humanity trembling in fear and the new humanity preparing to rise. And yet, a bridge is not ground. A bridge holds the weight of others while belonging to neither side. This is why your transformation feels both exhilarating and lonely. You stand between worlds, interpreting signals from a future most cannot yet perceive. There will be days when you long for the old self, the one who could cry with ease, who felt everything like sunlight through open windows, who believed kindness alone could save the world. There is grief in evolution. A flower does not bloom without breaking the bud that once sheltered it. You may find yourself returning to memories like faded letters, the times you forgave too quickly, the nights you felt invisible despite loving fiercely, the relationships where you served as confessional, healer, or emotional womb. You may recall the exhaustion of carrying sadness not your own, the confusion of mistaking another's chaos for your calling. These reflections are not regression. They are integration. You are gathering the discarded fragments of your history, not to cling to them, but to weave them into a new self that can stand without collapsing. As this integration deepens, you may sense a presence within you, something ancient, something snake-like in its intelligence, something owl-like in its watching. The ancestors of the unconscious speak through instincts before they speak through words. They may guide you towards solitude. To many this solitude will look like withdrawal. But to the evolving empath, solitude is not escape. It is incubation. Within silence, you begin to hear what others cannot. The subtle tones of your intuition separating truth from delusion, resonance from projection. The old empath absorbed the world like a vessel without a lid. The evolving empath becomes a chalice, shaped, purposeful, sacred. You may feel the shift when conversations no longer drain you, because you no longer enter them without self-presence. You no longer bend to maintain harmony. You no longer shrink to avoid being misunderstood. You speak slower, with precision, with awareness of the psychic space you inhabit. And when silence answers instead of words, you do not panic. You observe. This is the empath evolving into the mystic. Yet evolution is never linear. There are nights when the unconscious rises like a storming sea, dreams sharp as mirrors, emotions sudden like thunder, old wounds demanding to be seen in new light. Do not mistake these storms for failure. They are the psyche's way of clearing pathways, like forests burning so new soil may be fed. Sit with the storm. Watch it. Let it pass through you instead of resisting its arrival. For resistance is how empaths once suffered, by clinging to pain as proof of purpose. Now you learn a different art. Witnessing without drowning, feeling without ownership, loving without dissolving. There will be visions. Some come as dreams, others as sudden recognitions in ordinary life. You may begin to see patterns, the same lesson arriving through different faces, the same message echoed in music, numbers, timing, strangers. Jung called this synchronicity, the meeting point where the inner world and outer world mirror one another with intention. When this happens frequently, the ego becomes startled. It says, "This cannot be coincidence." The soul answers, "It never was." You begin to sense that life is not a sequence of accidents but a dialogue. Your unconscious writing one line, reality responding with the next. In this era of empathic evolution, intuition becomes less of a whisper and more of a compass. Decisions that once felt impossible now unfold like petals. You no longer choose based on guilt or obligation. You choose based on alignment. If a situation contracts your energy, you step back. If it expands you, you move toward it. Not because it is easy, but because it is true. Truth becomes your orientation, not approval. And slowly, others feel it, the gravity of your presence. People lean toward you not because you save them, but because your clarity reminds them of their own. Still, transformation is rarely witnessed in silence for long. Others may respond to your evolution with confusion, even discomfort. Those accustomed to your softness may resent your new boundaries. Those who fed on your emotional labor may accuse you of coldness. They will say you've changed. And they will be right. Do not apologize. Evolution is not an act of betrayal. It is the soul remembering itself. When the empath evolves, they become less accessible to chaos. Not because they are closed but because they are no longer permeable. You no longer absorb darkness unconsciously. You illuminate it consciously. This illumination can be unsettling for those who prefer the comfort of their own shadow. Some will pull away. Let them. Every departure creates space for resonance. You will attract new mirrors. People who speak from depth instead of ego, who listen with presence instead of hunger, who meet your soul rather than your wounds. Relationships become fewer but truer. Conversations become slower but richer. Silence becomes not emptiness but fullness unspoken. This is how the empath enters their new evolutionary era. Not through noise but through refinement. In this refinement, a strange inner power awakens. Not power over others but power within yourself. A current running up the spine. A quiet fire beneath the ribs. A sense of being connected to something vast, intelligent, alive. You are no longer a receiver of emotional tides. You become a generator of meaning. You begin to create rather than respond. You begin to shape reality rather than endure it. And here we arrive at an exquisite paradox. The evolved empath becomes both more sensitive and more sovereign. Sensitivity without sovereignty once felt like a curse. Now sensitivity with sovereignty becomes vision. You sense what others feel but you see why they feel it. You hold empathy not like a sponge but like a mirror, reflecting without absorbing, guiding without losing yourself. The empath of the old world suffered for others. The empath of the new era awakens others through awareness. You are becoming that. Let us continue deeper still. For evolution is not merely a personal shift, but a collective movement. Humanity itself approaches a psychic threshold, and empaths are the early receptors, the first to feel the tremors beneath the surface of global consciousness. You are not just changing for yourself. You are changing because the world is preparing for a different kind of soul. And the next layer waits. As the inner transformation stabilizes, the world around you begins to shimmer with new meaning. Objects seem less physical than symbolic. A doorway is not just wood and hinges, but a metaphor for crossing thresholds. A river is not simply water but memory in motion. Even the sky becomes a canvas where the unconscious paints subtle warnings, promises, alignments. Your perception widens like a pupil in darkness, allowing reality itself to reintroduce you to textures you had long overlooked. What once felt mundane becomes mythic. You walk through the world as though walking through a dream, but this time, a dream you are awake inside. The empath entering this evolutionary phase senses that life is no longer random. It unfolds like a story written by both human and divine hands. You become aware that the unconscious is a co-author, shaping experiences with poetic logic. A broken relationship is not merely heartbreak. It is initiation. A period of isolation is not abandonment. It is purification. A sudden ending is not loss. It is redirection. And through these realizations, you begin to trust the unseen currents guiding you. There will be moments, perhaps often, when you wonder whether this inner expansion isolates you. The more awake you become, the fewer mirrors you find. Ordinary conversation feels thin like paper against skin. You crave depth. Not intensity for its own sake but authenticity. You crave the kind of dialogue that touches archetype, dream, myth, instinct, conversations that awaken, not distract. And until such companions appear, solitude remains your truest companion. Solitude is no longer a cold room. It is a monastery. In the monastery of your psyche, you begin to meet the figures of your inner world. The anima or animus approaches like a moonlit presence, not a romantic fantasy but the other half of your soul's architecture. The shadow steps forward solemnly, not as threat but as forgotten power. The self, radiant and unblinking, stands like the axis of your entire being, the archetype of wholeness, the golden thread running through past and future. These inner figures guide you through transformation not with words but with symbols. A raven in a dream may speak louder than 1,000 sermons. A single moment of intuition may rewrite an entire belief system. You begin to see that spirituality is not a philosophy. It is a psychology of the soul. The empath entering a new era becomes mystic not by seeking the heavens, but by descending into the unconscious. Enlightenment is not up. It is in. It is the folding of awareness back into the source. You are not climbing toward truth. You are remembering it. This remembrance feels like déjà vu, ancient but fresh, like meeting a friend you've always known. And this is perhaps the greatest revelation of your evolution. You realize you are not becoming something new. You are becoming something original. The empath you once were was just the seed. What emerges now is the tree. Roots deep in shadow, branches extending into vision. You were not born to merely feel the world. You were born to perceive it, to read it, to translate it from chaos into meaning. This is why the world has always felt louder to you. You were wired for signal, not noise. As this realization crystallizes, you begin to experience paradoxical qualities within yourself. Softness with strength, humility with authority, sensitivity with discernment, compassion with boundaries, intuition with logic. You are no longer one or the other. You are both. Wholeness replaces polarity. Integration replaces fragmentation. And life, which once overwhelmed you, now responds to you. Somewhere inside, quietly, you know, I am no longer the empath of yesterday. I am something else now, something rarer, deeper, more conscious. I am the next evolutionary expression of feeling. I do not live as a wound. I live as an instrument of awareness. And still we have further to travel. The next part awaits. A final descent into the unconscious ocean where your future self is already watching you cross the threshold. Now we stand at the final gate of this inner discourse, where language itself becomes insufficient to hold the transformation taking place within you. For evolution is not an idea. It is an alchemical event. Something in you dissolves, reforms, expands. You may not see it with the eyes, but you feel it beneath thought like a quiet fire. This fire is not destructive. It is refining. It burns away imitation and leaves only essence. The empath entering a new evolutionary era does not ascend like a saint, nor rebel like a warrior. They awaken like dawn. It happens slowly. Then suddenly, one morning you notice you are less reactive to chaos. Another evening you respond to conflict with clarity rather than collapse. You find yourself speaking truth without trembling. You find yourself resting in uncertainty without fear. You find yourself breathing more deeply, not because the world is quieter but because you are. The nervous system that once trembled under the weight of emotion becomes symphonic, responsive but not overwhelmed, attuned but not consumed. You no longer confuse connection with obligation. You no longer bleed to prove you care. You love without losing yourself, and you withdraw without guilt. This balance, this exquisite equilibrium, is the signature of your new era. It is not perfection but coherence. You are organized from within, no longer scattered by the tides of others. And because of this inner coherence, life begins to arrange itself differently around you. You attract experiences aligned with your state of consciousness. You meet people who mirror your depth instead of your wounds. Opportunities emerge with an almost supernatural timing. What once required force now arrives through flow. You stop chasing, and what is meant for you begins to follow. Even your definition of power changes. You no longer see power as dominance or control, but as presence. The ability to stand in your own awareness without collapsing into projection or fear. The evolved empath becomes powerful not by becoming harder, but by becoming truer. There is no armor, only authenticity. No performance, only being. You do not command respect. You radiate it. Yet let us not misunderstand. Evolution does not grant immunity to pain. It grants relationship to pain. You feel deeply still, perhaps even more deeply. But now feeling is not a trap. It is a compass. The sorrow you encounter does not drown you. It teaches you where love has not yet grown. The anger you feel does not corrupt you. It shows you where boundaries were betrayed. The loneliness you meet does not shame you. It signals where your soul is asking for higher connection. You become fluent in the language of emotion, not as victim but as translator. In this fluency, compassion matures. Compassion is no longer pity. It is perception. You see others not as broken but as unfinished. Every person you meet becomes a fragment of the collective unconscious, a story unfolding, a psyche in evolution. You no longer rush to heal them. You witness them. You understand their shadow as you understand your own. When they hurt you, you sense the wound beneath their action. When they love you, you sense the soul beneath their offer. This awareness transforms relationship into revelation. Each bond becomes a mirror. Each conflict becomes a portal. Each goodbye becomes a rite of passage. You learn that connection is not judged by duration but by depth. Some souls stay for years and scarcely touch you. Others meet you for a moment and change everything. And perhaps the greatest shift of all, you stop running from your own destiny. You feel it now as a pulse beneath your ribs. The future is no longer a concept. It is a presence. Something ahead of you calls like a distant drumbeat, a rhythm older than language. You sense that your existence is not random. You were born to feel so you could perceive. You were born to perceive so you could awaken. And you were born to awaken so you could guide. Not by preaching, not by rescuing, simply by being aligned. The new world does not need louder voices. It needs deeper ones. Not more minds but more consciousness. The empath entering this evolutionary era becomes both witness and architect of what humanity is becoming. You are not here to merely survive the age of noise. You are here to usher in an age of awareness. There will come a day when you look back on your life and recognize that every heartbreak was initiation, every confusion was training, every sensitivity was prophecy. You were not weak. You were early. You felt the future before others believed in it. You carried the collective wound before others knew how to name it. Now you begin to carry something else, not the pain of the world but the consciousness that can transform it. Close your eyes for a moment even as you read. Listen inward. There is a presence watching you, not external but internal. A self both ancient and newborn. A soul that has survived centuries of memory. A voice beneath your thoughts, beneath your fears, beneath your history. It speaks softly but without doubt. You are evolving not into someone new but into someone whole. The empath of yesterday absorbed the world. The empath of today perceives it. The empath of tomorrow shapes it. You are crossing that threshold now. And when you step fully into this era, when your sensitivity becomes vision, when your heart becomes sovereign, when your shadow becomes integrated, when your intuition becomes intelligence, you will realize something profound. You were never too much. You were the preview of a future humanity. Those who come after you will feel as you do now. They will speak the language of emotion without shame. They will navigate reality through intuition and awareness. They will remember what we forgot, that the soul is not separate from evolution. It is evolution. And you, empath, are among the first sparks of that new dawn. Carry your sensitivity as crown, not burden. Carry your boundaries as scripture, not defense. Carry your depth as compass, not anchor. Carry your soul as witness, not martyr. For you are entering, fully, consciously, irrevocably, a new evolutionary era.